Good evening. I hope you guys are all doing well. We're learning Maseches Nazir, Daf Lamed Daled, and we are starting Lamed Daled Lamed Aleph about a third of the way down to the new Mishnah. This Mishnah is a similar frame as the previous one, where a group of people were stacking one Nazirs on top of another about an issue that they were unsure about. In the last Mishnah, the one we learned on Shabbos, they weren't sure if the guy coming toward them was Ruvain or not. So the first guy said Hareini Nazir because that's Ruvain. The second guy said Hareini Nazir that it's not Ruvain. In a similar vein, this Mishnah begins as follows. Again, Lamed Daled Lamed Aleph, 1/3 of the way down. Ra es hakoy, a person sees an animal that has be'etzem, a suffix as to whether it's a chaya or a behema, different kinds of animals. So a chaya has its own dinim, behemas have their own dinim, the nafkamin is usually chelev and some other significant items. So we don't know what the status is of the koy. Fine. The Omar, guy number one says, Hareini Nazir shezeh chaya. This guy is confident. He's like, I'm a Nazir, and that animal is a chaya, and therefore I'm a Nazir. The second person says, Hareini Nazir shezeh eino chaya, the opposite. I'm a Nazir because that animal is not a chaya. The third person says, Hareini Nazir shezeh behema. He says, forget all of you. I'm going to go the exact opposite direction. I'm going to be a Nazir because that's a behema. The fourth guy says, Hareini Nazir she'ein zeh behema. Again, these are two sets of similar iterations. The fifth person says Hareini Nazir shezeh chaya ubehema, which is extremely odd. This animal has both features. The sixth person says Hareini Nazir she'ein zeh lo chaya v'lo behema. What are we up to? The seventh person says Hareini Nazir she'echad mikem Nazir. Well, I don't know who's right, but one of you is probably a Nazir, so I'll be a Nazir based on you. The eighth person says, I have to keep looking at my fingers because there's so many. Hareini Nazir, she'ein echad mikem Nazir. This guy is the confident guy in the other direction. Oh, you guys are a bunch of Amaratzim. None of you are Nazirim, and therefore I'm a Nazir. And the ninth person says, Hareini Nazir she'kulchem Nazirim. And the ninth person says, I'm going to be a Nazir because all of you are Nazirim. How does the Mishnah paskin? The Mishnah paskins the pashtos with no machlokes harekulan Nazirim. How is that possible? So if you take a look. What?
You said Nazir, and then whatever comes after.
Oh, that's not the answer, but that's good. That's not the answer though. Because you're saying you said the phrase Hareini Nazir.
Right.
So we don't know. It always follows that they have to be tied together. So it has to make sense. Hareini Nazir because that's a doorknob. So it has to, once you're connecting them, they have to be real. So the Rivan deals with this question. Inner margin 1/3 of the way down. Dibra hamaschel rasa koi kula Nazirin. Ve'aliba de beishamai ta'amre. Hektish betos to have a hektish v'hu adin lenazir betos. It's a nazir betos, so it's a hektish betos, and therefore every last one of them is a nazir. Even though it's impossible, some of the iterations of our Mishnah is impossible. Some people said opposite things. I'm a nazir because it is a chaya. I'm a nazir because it doesn't matter. All of them are nazirim. All 9 people. The Brisa opens 2/3 of the way down. Tani Chada, we have one version of our Brisa that says Tisha Nazirim. We're talking about 9 different people stacked one upon the other, 9 Jews, and each one was person 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 within our Mishnah. But look at this, V'tanya Idach, there's another Brisa that says Tesha Nazirios. It's one person with 9 sets of Nazirs that he has to keep, 270 days. Says the Gemara, Tisha Nazir, and I understand the first brisa. Kigon to have a gavre tafe de itfis v'azil bay. Like our Mishnah says, you got one guy, then you got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We understand that's how Mishnah was stacked, one person on top of the other. Elatation Nazir sechad gavre hechi mishkachasla. How do you have all of this be one person? That doesn't even make any sense. We remove the word kiddutznan. I understand the first 6, maybe there is such a thing, because if you look at the first 6 out of the 9 cases in our Mishnah, the first 6 cases is where one person says he can say all 6 lines. The problem is that options 7, 8, and 9 speak about they're dependent on other people's claims. Look at options 7, 8, and 9. I'm a Nazir because one of you is a Nazir. You can't say that when you're one. This isn't like a person who has 2 personalities, the id and the ego. That's not what's going on here. So what's the actual case? Aval talaz, the last 3 because the last 3 were dependent on one of the previous 6. So how do we have that it's going to be one person who's representing 9 Nazirios? So says the Gemara, there's something missing in our Mishnah, and really it's possible that we're talking about one person with 9 Nazirios, and that is that there's a 10th person. And Omar of Sheshes could go into Omar, the 10th guy, Hareini Nazir, unazirus hakol alai. I accept upon me what all of you have, which is 9 Nazirios.
Why wouldn't that be 10? Because he's the 10th.
Because I'm only accepting what the previous 9 people have done. That was my Kabbalah. That was my Hareini Nazir. No, they're also Nazir. I am taking on what those 9 people have. which in aggregate is 9 Nazirios.
95, but he's also five.
He's the 10th, but he's only chayiv in 9 Nazirios. He's only chayiv in 9 Nazirios because all he accepted upon himself was what the others accepted. So 9 times 30 is 270. So that's what he accepted upon
Probably
himself.
why the Torah takes up the words from many Nazir.
No, why?
Right.
Why would that explain?
That's 30. Bin is 0
Uh-huh.
270. I wonder if that's why. Take that out, that's how you end up with your 270, like you said.
Wow,
I wonder if that's why. That really makes sense.
certainly does. Does anybody else quote this? Kagon to Amar to Baalei Tosfos have it. Hareini Nazir and Sirsa Kolalai Ro'a Tes B'nei Adam Shenit Su'atzim V'Nazirim B'Koi V'Amar Harei Alai Kol Dain Nazirus Kulchem Harei Yesh Lav Tisha Sveikos Nazirus. So he has to keep them all. That's the Reb Shimon caveat that we saw in Shabbos. But Baalei Tosfos don't say what you're saying.
No.
They don't seem to be bothered by it. But I totally hear what you're saying. Totally hear that.
I mean, the Gemara moves it. The question is, why would he,
Mhm.
everything we've said for the last month is always heard of the words.
It's cleaner if you remove it.
It's cleaner, but the Baalei Tosfos weren't bothered by it, it seems. But I totally hear you. Okay. Hadron Alach Beis Shammai Baruch Hashem. We finished the 5th parak of Maseches Nazir. Yerusha, we should come back to this stuff in 7.5 years. Amen. Buckle up, everybody. Today we're going to learn the difference between a drasha, which is ribui and miut, in comparison to prat, uklal, uprat. Prat. I want to say that this will separate the boys from the men, but I think we'll all be boys by the end of this anyways. So it's a hard Gemara. The beginning part's not so hard, but when we get into the actual lumdas of how we know what's included in the Yisr of Nazirus, that's really where we have to earn our keep. Let's get started. We know as it relates to Nazirus, as we begin the new parak, which is called Shlosha Minin, that there are Shlosha Minin Asurim v'Nazir. There are 3 categories of things that are forbidden for a Nazir. Hatuma, v'atiglachas, v'hayotze min hagefen. A person who's a regular Nazir is not allowed to become tamei meis. They're not allowed to get a haircut, and they're not allowed to drink or eat anything that's yotze min hagefen. These words we have to understand what yotze min hagefen means. The various portions of the grape, let's say the seed, the flesh, the skins, they all add up together. When do you have the chiyuv of malkos? The chiyuv of malkos is only once you've eaten a kizayis. However, turning to the Mishnah on the top of Lamed Daled Amud Beis, and we're going to be going until about 8 or 7 lines from the bottom of the page. Mishnah Rishona, we had a previous Mishnah where they taught something a little different. Omeres ad sheyishta revi'is yayin, and within this frame we had the following halacha. Rabbi Akiva Omer, afilu shara pito biyayin. If a Nazir took his bread and dipped it in wine, v'yesh ba, and in that bread with the wine there was enough kedei litzarf kazayis chayav. This is a chiddush. It's a big chiddush. You take your soup and you put a piece of challah in it, and then it absorbs whatever it absorbs. So let's say in weight, you're dealing with half an ounce of soup and a half an ounce of challah. And if their volume is a kazayis, then if that was wine, then you're mamash chayav. So this is actually a din in Hilchos Birkas Hamazon, which is how do we measure the kazayis that you need to eat in order to bring yourself to an obligation of benching? We know the pasuk says, "Ve'achalta v'savata." What's kedei svia? So the poskim write that if a person is eating a sandwich, and they didn't actually eat enough bread to bring about a kazayis, but with all the deli on the inside and the lettuce and the tomatoes, if the volume of everything in the sandwich is mitzdaref to a kazayis, then you're chayav to bench, seemingly midoraisa. Masha'en came when it's mizonos. If a person's eating cereal and milk, or again, mizonos mixed with berries, whatever the case may be, and the volume that you ate is a kazayis, but the grain is less than a kazayis, then you're not chayiv in a bracha achrona. This is only a din by Birkas Hamazon with tremendous nafkaminas midoraisa. Okay, so that's what Rabbi Akiva says, is that if the bread had been dipped in the wine and you eat the bread, if the tseruf of the volume of the wine with the volume of the bread is a kazayis, then that is going to be a chiyuv. V'chayiv al hayayin bifnei atzmo. One can obviously violate the Isser with wine by itself, Ve'al ha'anavim bifnei atzman, or straight up grapes, Ve'al ha'chartzanim bifnei atzman, Ve'al ha'zagin bifnei atzman. We don't yet know which parts of the grapes are the chartzanim and which parts of the grapes are the zagin, which is a machlokas tanaim, which we're going to see right now. One of them holds what that chartzanim is the skins, and the zagim are the pits, and one holds the opposite. We're used to seedless grapes, but the real grapes have seeds in them. They have to procreate it. So that's how they continue. But we always get seedless ones. Fine. What's the machlokas about chartzanim and zag? 6 lines down on Lamed Daled Amud Beis, the Mishnah continues. Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah Omer, Ein chayev ad sheyochal shnei chartzanim v'zag. You're not going to be chayev until you eat 2 chartzanim and zag. Again, we still don't know what these things are, but this is mashma based on the pasuk, because the pasuk reads, Mechartzanim ve'ad zag. Chartzanim is a plural word, and zag is a singular word. So therefore, according to Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, the only time you're going to be chayiv is when you eat 2 chartzanim, because the pasuk is plural by chartzanim, and 1 zag, because zag in the pasuk is singular. What is what? Eluhein chartzanim ve'eluhein zagim. How do we know what's what? Ha-chartzanim elu ha-chitzonim. According to this first approach, which we'll soon see as Rabbi Yehuda, he says that the skins are the outer part. That's called the chartzanim, and ha-zagim elu ha-pnimim. The zagim are the seeds on the inside. Dibri Rabbi Yehuda. However, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yossi Omer shelo site kizug shel behema. If you don't want to make a mistake, you should remember the bell of a cow. Hachitzon is called the zug. The hapnimi inval, the inside of a bell, is called an inval, and that's how we're supposed to remember it. So actually, I stated incorrectly. I said there was a machlokas tanaim. There is no machlokas tanaim about this. That's not true. That is the din here that the chartzanim are the what did I say? Shelosita kizug shel behema, the bell. The zugin are the no. Hachitzon zug. Hapnimi inval. So maybe it is a machlokas. Sorry, let me just go back a second. The first shita says hachartzanim elu hachitzonim hazagim elu hapnim. Yeah, that's the Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi argues. Yeah, he says don't make a mistake. Kizug shel behema. It is a machlokas. Yeah, kizug shel behema hachitzon zug hapnimi inval. Yeah, there is a machlokas. Okay. If I'm messing up the easy parts, I'm in big trouble.
Omer, as opposed to Omer Rabbi Yossi, always means the argument.
Yes, but the language of shelo sita is very confusing because it makes you seem. It's often like that. It's usually, correct. Yeah. So I found this language to be confusing, obviously, because when I learned it in my head, it was a machlokas, and then when I read it, I'm like, maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so that's the machlokas. Oh my gosh. So are the next 8 lines, and then after that, it's all downhill. Shlosha min Nazir ben Nazir atuma v'chule. That's what we said in our Mishnah. 3 areas of Isser. Hayotze min hagefen in. Yes, it's correct. That which is a derivative of the grapevine is going to be part of the Isser. Gefen atzmo lo. But the branches and the physical parts that are what grape and beyond is the Isser, and the branches itself is going to be mutter, I guess, in theory. If you want to chew on that, it's not really edible, but
still make a fire with it or something.
No, it's consumption.
No,
it's for him. It's consumption. For the Nazir, he has to consume it. So let's say the nafkamin is if there's a little bit of a stem on the grape and you just decide to pop the whole thing in your mouth. That could be that is a machlokas in our Gemara. Whether what those are called the shoots. Those pieces. There's leaves. There's 4 parts of the grape. There's the grape. There's leaves. There's the shoots, which is what holds our clusters together, and then there's the wood of the branch itself. So those are going to be the 4 things that we're going to be discussing. And the Gemara says, Masnis in our Mishnah is the loker Rabbi Lazar. What does Rabbi Lazar hold the time? Rabbi Lazar Omer, afilu olin vilu lavin b'mashma, that even the leaves and the shoots are going to be problematic. The only thing he excludes is the actual wood vines of the grapevine. And we've seen them growing before, but we don't really think much about it. We usually assume that the vines and the cluster are the same. They're not the same. That's where he draws the line. So it's really everything off of the vine he holds as part of the Isser Nazirus. So let's say you wanted to take the leaves and make it into a green shake in the morning in your blender, Isser. That's not allowed. You want to take the branches and you want to do whatever you want with it, no problem. You want to make medicines out of it, no problem. But if you're a Nazir, you're not allowed to do that. Ika de Amre, some say that we actually learned this distinction from the Seifa. Ika de Amre lo a Seifa. What did the Seifa say? we had said, Eino chayiv ela ad sheyochal min ha'anavim kezayis, min ha'anavim in me'agef and atzma lo, and masnisin delok Rabbi Eliezer, same exact information, just do we learn it from the Reisha, from the Seifa. What did Rabbi Eliezer hold? The Tainer Rabbi Eliezer, afilu olen filu lavin b'mashma. So we have our Mishnah, which seems to say one thing, which seems to say that the grapes are the problem. And we have Rabbi Eliezer, who seems to say that the olen and lulavin are also problematic. B'mai kamiflagei. What is it that our Mishnah and Rabbi Eliezer disagree about? Rabbi Eliezer, who has a more inclusive version of the Isser, where he says that not only are the grapes part of the Isser for the Nazir, but the Alin and the Lulavin are also going to be problematic. So what does he learn from? So Rabbi Eliezer Darish Ribuye Umiute, and Rabbanon Darshe Klale Uprate. So we're familiar with the Yud Gimel Midos Shator and Idreshes Bahen. We don't have Ribuy and Miut in there. So first of all, just in Lumdus, we should know that when we look at a pasuk, if we're using the tool of Ribuy and Miut to extract, that's not the way that we learn. That's not what we do. Ribuy and Miut is not found in the Yud Gimel Midos of Rabbi Shmuel. We do have, however, Klal Uprate, and in particular, what we're going to be discussing today is a Prat Uklal Uprat, and we'll see the psukim, if you have them on the side, it's very helpful. So this is the difference between them. The reason why Rabbi Eliezer has more of an inclusive understanding, where the Alin and the Lulavim, where the leaves and the shoots are considered part of the Isser Nazir, is because of the style of extraction of how he learns from the pasuk to the halacha. Because he used Ribuy and Miut, he was able to include more in the Isser. Masha'en came when it came to the author of our Mishnah, because they're Darshe Klale Uprate, therefore the rules are different, the extractions are leaner, and there's less included in the Isser. That's the Rosh Prakim. And here are the details. Halfway down, Lamed Daled Amud Beis. Rabbi Eliezer Darish Ribuye Umeute. How does he learn the psukim? So the pasuk says Miyayin v'sheichar yazir. That's a short list of things that are problematic. There's 100 types of grape soda, grape gum. There's a billion things that could be usher. Certainly in our world, where we have extractions of every possible fruit and every other cross-contaminated food. We have grapes and so many things we don't even know. So the Gemara says over here that what Rabbi Eliezer was looking at in the pasuk was that was a miut. Is a limiting, and then the next pasuk says Mikol Asher Yasem Gefen Hayayin, which is a riba. That's a ribui. So we have the limited followed by the expanding. And how do we learn this? Mi'et v'riba, riba hakol. When you have a miut and you have a ribui, so then we have to include something new. My riba. What is to be included here? Riba kol mile. What does it mean kol mile? Not only the grapes, but also the alin. And the what was the other word? Lulavin, that the leaves and the shoots are also going to be included in the Isser. My mi'et, what does he leave out? Mi'et shabishta. He leaves out the actual vine branches. And this is how Rabbi Eliezer, it's actually not so hard, this part. Rabbi Eliezer says we have a miut, it's followed by a ribui. The ribui includes not just the grapes, but the alin and the lulavin. But when it comes to the vine itself, then if you want to make a magical potion out of that, no problem if you're a Nazir, I don't mind. But the Rabbanon, they use a different exegetical tool to learn the psukim. The Rabbanon darshe klale uprate. Please don't be confused by the words klale uprate. We're not learning a klal uprat. We're learning a pratu klal uprat. We're just talking about the genre of learning that includes klalim and pratim. This language thoroughly confused me. I'm like, that's not a klal uprat. It's correct. It's not a klal uprat, but it's in the camp of klal uprat as opposed to the camp of ribui and miut. So let's learn what the Gemara means here. One part of the pasuk says miyayin v'sheichar yazir, which is a prat. Again, as mentioned, it's a limited list. Then the pasuk goes and adds mikol asher yasem gefen hayayin. That's a klal. You started with the narrow. You went more expansive into the world of mikol, and then you came back to a prat in the next pasuk michartzanim va'adzag chazar uprat. Pratu chlal uprat iatadan ela ke'ein haprat. And then here's a drasha, and I'm going to just say this now. The next 10 words are really the drasha that we need to understand our sugya. It's to explain the shita of our Mishnah, the shita that goes against Rabbi Eliezer, but it won't be clear for 10 more lines as to what he means. Here's what the drasha is. When we say prat, uklal, uprat, iatadan elakena prat, what do we mean to say? Mahaprat, mefurash pri, upsoles pri, just like the prat. What was the prat? The last prat was chartzanim and zag. Just like one prat was talking about the pri itself, and one was talking about the psolas of the pri, which is the skins that don't make it into the wine. That's only for the tannins. They don't drink that. And they also get rid of the seeds. Af kol pri upsolas pri. There's something else being included in this list as well. So we'll have to see, because we know Chartzanim and Zag are included. That's Pashat, that's the Pasuk, that's part of the Isser. What else is being included, we don't know. But before we get to an explanation of this line to understand our Mishnah, we have a question on what's happening here. Imaha Prat, maybe we should have said that the Prat was Mefurash Pri Gamor, that we only mean to include a full Pri. Maybe that's what was meant to be included by the Pasuk, and Av Kol Pri Gamor only to include full fruits. That can't be, because Amras Im Kain, if the Pasuk meant to say that we were talking about a Mefurash Pri, a Pri Gamor, a full Pri, then Mahiniach L'cha Kasu B'mashmo Shelo Amro, then everything in the Pasuk has been included already. Anovim lachem v'yeveshim haksivi, that we know already because it's a full Pri. Yain v'chometz we know is excluded haksivi. So it says the Gemara, ha'ein alecha ladun kelashon achron ela kelashon rishon. You shouldn't have to learn that way. The lashon achron here is referencing kol Pri Gamor, but rather we should say, like we initially learned, that it's not kol Pri Gamor, but it's mefurash Pri. It is talking about a Pri, but something else has to be extracted from the psukim. In other words, if we were trying to learn a drasha in this pasuk that was talking about the full fruit, we would have no klal upratu klal. It would be simple and clear what's going on. Only the fruit is going to be problematic and nothing else. The pri, let's look back. The pri is part of the klal. Yeah, mikol asher yasemi gefen hayayin. And then the prat comes back to Chartzan and Vizag. So the Gemara here is actually asking a slightly different question, and it's not different, it's just another layer underneath, which is, why is it that we're learning the psukim as pratu klal uprat? Maybe we should just learn them as pratu klal and leave out the last. That's really what's happening, which is, again, these are two different steps of Rabbi Shmuel and that we say every morning. So here the Gemara says, Ume'achar, we're 5 lines before the wide lines. Ume'achar shesofenu l'rabos kol davar, because we know we need to include more things. Matal malomar mechartzanim ve'adzag. What then does the second prat add? Lomar lach kol makom she'ata motzei prat uklal. In any place, in what? What does that come to teach us? Whenever you find only a prat and a klal, not pratu klal uprat, but only pratu klal, the rules are different. We don't then only apply the limiting factors of the prat. Then we actually add new things to the prat from the klal. Until you have an extra prat like we saw over here. In other words, a prat uklal is different than a prat uklal uprat. In a prat uklal, we take the prat and we add new things to it from the klal. In a prat uklal uprat, we actually narrow down on the more narrow things, so it's a more limited understanding. So therefore, now let's come to our conclusion. We learned the easier part of Rabbi Eliezer, who said it's a ribui and a miut. The ribui was to include the alin and the lulavin, that the leaves and the shoots are going to be problematic, but not the shabishta, not the vines. Now let's understand the sheets of our Mishnah. First of the very long lines, end of the line, Omar Mar, we had said a couple of lines ago, Maha prat mefurash pri upsolas pri, avkol pri upsolas pri. So now let's analyze this to see how our Mishnah understood things. Pri inve, the fruits of grapes. Psolas pri, mai inve, we know what the pri is. Pri is a grape. What's the psolas pri mai? Chometz, that's vinegar, to be included. What's af kol pri mai? That's guharki. Guharki are unripe grapes that are also included. Af kol the psolas pri mai, what's included over here? Amar of kahana lisui inve dichrin. Inve dichrin are grapes that have worms in them. They're really not edible, but they're still part of the Isser. What does ve'ad zog mean? Amar Ravina le'asuye debein habenim. Very unique addition, that if one were to eat a grape in the following way, you peel the skin and you remove the seed and then you eat it just like that. Is that considered part of Nazirus? We would have thought, but pashtos it is. The pashtos have a meaning that maybe it wouldn't be. That's what the klal uprat, the prat uklal uprat came to add in. So what then is left out? What's left out is what Rabbi Eliezer included. Rabbi Eliezer said that the leaves and the shoots are included based on ribui and miut. But based on the pratu klalu prat of our Mishnah, what's left out of the Isser is the alin and is the lulavin. So that then is the machlokas in Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the Isser of Nazirus starts with a grape, includes the leaves and includes the shoots, and then you're done. Branches are out. But according to the Pratu Klalu Prat of our Mishnah, it's actually more limited. And that is that only the grape is going to be the Isser. The Olin and the shoots are not part of the Isser. So if you wanted to take those leaves and make tea out of them, yeah. So what's happening over here, and this is important for Shas, is to remember that when we're dealing with a ribui and a miut on the one side, versus a pratu klalu prat on the other side, the ribui and the miut will always include more things. It's less rigid, and the pratu klalu prat is always more narrow. And in this case, that narrowness is a kula for the Nazir, because there's fewer things that are part of the Isser of Nazirus for the Nazir. So this is a difficult Gemara. It requires really a lot of time to pore over, to understand all of the pieces. But generally speaking, I think we do have a clarity. There's just different types of limudim. And we're going to stop right here at Omar Mar, which is 6, 7, 8 lines from the bottom, 6 lines from the bottom. We'll pick up right here tomorrow night. And we're going to continue with this sugya a little bit longer, but not as hard as the beginning part. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
Is that the same, what, observed for us to have a break? Is it the same?